Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us again. We've got another panel assembled of Openfield experts talking about some of the insights that we came together to share for our end of 2020 and look ahead to 2021 article. So today I've gathered Chris Albert, Design Director, Kyle Bentel, UX Designer, Ali Lozanak, UX Designer, and Julie Peterson, a Senior UX Designer and Accessibility Lead. And once again, I'm Trevor Minton, VP of Product Experience. So in this discussion with our new panel, we're going to talk about, in loose terms, the trends we see coming ahead in 2021. But to be clear, this is more trends about kind of where we see this space in EdTech going in terms of focus and thought processes and prioritization, less so about, like, say, design trends and things like that we maybe more typically see when we talk about trend forecasting. So this is more about reacting to so much of the change we just experienced in the past year that our previous two panels touched on quite a bit. And now we'd like to take a chance to talk about some of the common themes that have emerged and where our thoughts are kind of prioritizing themselves going forward. So right out of the gate with that, common theme with the group in prepping us for the article and offering our team's insights was the abundance of data that we find ourselves working with. It's really become an integral part of how we make our tools useful and productive. Kyle, I was hoping you could expand on that thought a little bit more about what are the things we think about when we try to make data more meaningful, especially when we talk about how much data so many of these tools are capable of collecting, and avoiding a place where we just have mountains and mountains of information that we don't really have a great way of leveraging or doing much with.
Yeah, 2020 saw a huge growth, in the role of EdTech. What was once, just maybe part of the educational experience is now the entirety of the educational experience, and all that technology is generating massive amounts of data. We know if we harness that data, we can increase education outcomes kind of across the board, students, instructors, administrators. I think there's a couple keys to successfully using that data. Like you mentioned, there's a lot of it. Big data is hard. They can be overwhelming. It's difficult to see actual trends. It's hard to figure out what's real, what's not. And that's where I think some of this new technology is going to be kind of the key. Looking into things like advanced analytics and maybe like machine learning, stuff like that. It's definitely something, an area that product teams need to be aware of. But also, I think that's just one side of the coin too. On the flip side, it's not enough just for us to understand that data. It's not worth anything if it's not communicated directly. And I think that's going to be the differentiator. I hear from instructors all the time that, we can show them the slickest, most advanced dashboard in the world that it says everything they need to know, but they don't have the time to actually sit down and figure it out. They're busy. They say, just tell me what I need to do. So I think that effective communication is what's really key, just getting these data insights to the people that need them in a way that's not only clear, but actionable. That's really what's going to be the key to success.
Great.
Yeah, and I'll throw in there as well that I think in addition to making sure that that our data is handled well and is consumable and provides the right types of insights. I think another thing that the enormous amount of change that we've been experiencing lately kind of underscores is how important it is to identify what types of data. Some research may be needed to help better understand what types of data really needs to be given to instructors and your other audiences in the ed tech space to make better decisions to adapt in real time. I think that's kind of like the big, one big theme of this past year is just the ability of everybody's had to adapt and do it without much preparation. So, figuring out what data, would be more helpful in letting, every part of our constituencies kind of understand how, figure out how to adapt more readily and more easily, I think would be helpful.
Exactly right. Well, Chris, let's stay with you for a minute and kind of move on to our next sub-theme here when we're looking ahead. I was struck by how much of what we're talking about at the end of a year like we just experienced is about disruption. So there's clearly the disruption we faced that changed so much about how we approached our work and our users in 2020. But let's kind of flip that around. And you made a good point, Chris, about several of you did, about looking ahead with disruption in mind. And in my mind, I kind of translated that to it's maybe considered a bit of the new normal we keep talking about in terms of how disruptive the landscape is and sort of how we measure success and improvement of our products. So just expand on that for us a little bit, Chris.
Sure. Yeah. It's really easy to look at the last year we've had as, all of this disruption that COVID has caused as being a negative. It's easy to point at the stress and all that kind of stuff, but there's also it's also acted as a catalyst, really. It's a catalyst for innovation and improvement, depending upon how you react to it. And, I think all of us have reacted probably in good ways and ways we're proud of, and in ways that maybe we're not, or that we struggled with. But in the EdTech space, we've seen some of our clients really use this opportunity to take a step back and do one of the hardest things that you can do, which is to disrupt from the inside. Meaning, we've had COVID kind of change our, kind of force us to, assess our priorities and take a step back. And, it's been the disruptor that everybody has, kind of thinks of it as. But, beyond that, what's important is what you do with that. Okay, there's been a disruptive factor here. So how do we respond as an organization, whether we're a publisher or whether, we're an EdTech, software, organization, whatever. How do we adapt to that? Even in the areas where they're, they've been very established in how they do things. They're looking at ways to not only solve the problem for now, but solve the problem with kind of the lens of adaptability. How will this help us adapt to unknown disruptors in the future, or help us adapt in a more flexible and graceful way as things continue to change? Because this is not the only disruption we're going to experience, right? So I think that's kind of the really exciting thing I've seen from several of our clients is this willingness to use it as a catalyst to actually innovate.
Yeah, absolutely. And that that kind of led into a thought from Julie that you'd offered in our prep about, I kind of phrased it as elevating the disruptions that we knew already existed. Maybe expand on that thought a little bit.
Yeah, so the big one really this year that we've all had to combat with is the integrity of the work that students are doing. So students have always cheated. It's nothing new. But now that everything's moved online, they're only accessing digital content. So they're the usual tips and tricks of instructors to try and combat that are no longer viable. So you got paper tests. That's no longer a thing. So students are frequently sharing the digital content because it's super easy to do. You can screenshot it. You can take a picture with your phone and share it. And that is rampant. There are websites dedicated to getting students answers quickly, which is hurting the integrity very, very badly. And so I think what I predict we're going to see is either instructors trying to find new tools to combat this, or completely restructure the way they're teaching. Because when we look at the tool side of things, there are many things out there that they can use, whether it's proctoring, whether it's timed assignments, password protected assignments. There's still concerns around security and user rights. And so we've even seen some students suing institutions because they feel like their rights as people on the internet are being violated by proctoring solutions. So that's why I think like tools aren't going to be the end all be all. I think it's going to, well, my hope is that it creates a place where instructors can like change the way they're assessing, change the way they're teaching, that aren't so reliant on the tools that are currently out there. And I think we're going to see a big shift in that.
And like you say, it's so much of this is a case of further exposing disruptions that already existed. So that's where you started with that thought. Is this was already a thing and always was. We've just exacerbated it kind of at scale, literally almost overnight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sticking with the disruption theme, Allie, in our first panel discussion, we talked a lot about the roadmap pivots that all of our teams and clients experienced this year. I know on your team in particular, that had some huge repercussions for, pulling things forward in your roadmap that were previously deprioritized suddenly became the most important thing to fast track.
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of our roadmap, speaking from personal experience, working on a product that its niche is kind of in this in-class engagement where we, previously defined that engagement by students and instructors being physically together in class. So that's kind of no longer, during COVID. So something we had to address was how do we continue to drive that relationship between the instructor and the student? So there were definitely a lot of pivots on our end. We started to kind of deprioritize some of the features that we had defined earlier in the year to continue to foster that physical in-class experience for the kind of engaging remote experience. And I wouldn't say that, it's not something that like totally came out of the blue. It's probably something we should have always considered. So moving forward, I think that we'll definitely start to think more about the different features we're building. How do they foster the physical experience versus the remote experience? And also with, when we design tools and features, we might be working on a product that serves as a toolbar, but when you have remote meeting tools like Zoom that has its own toolbar, how do those things work together? So some of those considerations that we didn't previously think about heavily, that they're definitely like recurring in our minds now.
Absolutely. Yeah, we saw in some ways it was like watching nice to haves become sudden must haves, right? That we had to apply all new considerations to. Great. All right. Well, moving along then to the final piece here, I wanted to be certain that we gave the broad topic of accessibility its due. And Julie, I wanted to hear from you on this, not only because of your accessibility lead role at Openfield, but just because of your day in, day out experience with this at the product level. I think the overarching point I wanted to lead with is it's far from a new consideration. But to think of it in terms of how we look forward to 2021 and all of these disruptive factors going on and sort of changing how we prioritize needs and meaning in our products. Just talk a little bit more about maybe some of the kind of hidden accessibility challenges that are now being exposed through remote learning.
Yeah, so I'll start with student and go over that quickly because there's already a lot of content out there focusing on the students, focusing on keeping them up to speed, not letting them get behind. And really, when it comes to accessibility, like if you have the right things in place, it shouldn't have been a hard transition. But as we saw, it was a hard transition for students. But what I really want to talk about is the instructor side, because I don't think there's as many people talking about this. But essentially, with the sudden shift, we now made instructors become their own experts in accessibility because of lack of training, lack of documentation, and lack of preparation to be able to move everything online. So because they had to move everything online, they now had to make it available to all of their students, regardless of their abilities. And when they don't have that information, they have to go and find it themselves. And a lot of the EdTech software that's out there isn't helping educate them and isn't giving them the right tools to be able to create accessible deliverables, whether it's tests, grades, things like that. So really, due to that, I think that's what the highlight was the most on the instructor side, was how much extra work they didn't know they were going to have to do in order to make sure that all students can keep up, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely right. All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for your time and offering additional insights that you all experienced firsthand throughout the year and are keeping top of mind as we get into this new year and look forward to kind of pulling the positive out of a chaotic year last year. I think we learned a lot about our industry, what it was prepared for and what it was unprepared for. And I feel like with all of the products we work on and our clients' organizations, all of us have come out of that year stronger and more prepared for innovation and new ideas that actually make positive differences in educational experiences going forward.